Welcome back to the Buckeye Breakdown Podcast. Buckeyes Now on Sports Illustrated with our continuing coverage of the Ohio State Buckeyes. Tonight, a 59-7 win and an impressive win at that over the Akron Zips. They took care of business in a game that looked almost normal. It was really close to being normal, but certainly much closer than what we've seen the last couple of weeks. I'm Brendan Gulick with Andrew Lind on a night where fans had a whole lot of reasons to be happy. But perhaps we start with the biggest storylines that are leaving some fans maybe scratching their heads a little bit, and some others wondering why the slow start. If you had it on your bingo card at home that Akron was going to lead 7-0 midway through the first quarter, it probably didn't leave a great taste in your mouth. Yeah. That's exactly what happened. I don't think it's crazy to say that, Kyle McCord probably felt a whole bunch of adrenaline pumping through his veins in that first series. He needed to just bring the heart rate down a little bit and let the speed of the game come to him, as Ryan Day said it after the game. But once he did, the offense certainly looked like it got into a much better rhythm.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that, the first-time starter is going to deal with. Everything's just flying around, and you're not really used to the speed of the game in that situation. There's 100,000 people out here. He played in Philadelphia. You probably only have, maybe 10,000 people at a game at the most. So, to then sit there and be in that situation. And it really, I think that he performed well once he kind of got everything, settled a little bit. So.
Well, and he had such a great running attack. I mean, right from the first play from scrimmage, Travion Henderson runs for 12 yards up the middle. And as a true freshman quarterback, by the way, with a true freshman running back next to him, first time in program history that's ever happened to start a game. It certainly gives you a chance to exhale. And I thought that in successive series, Kyle McCord, the playbook got a little bit more diverse, a little more creative. But early on, it was a lot of shorter, quicker throws to just get the ball out of his hand and try to let somebody else make a play. His first career touchdown pass was a shovel pass to Olave. Yeah. What was practically a handoff, but ends up being a touchdown pass. I liked the play calling in that regard.
Yeah, I did too. And, it's kind of one of those things, like you said, to get the ball out of his hands quickly, just get him used to throwing the ball. And I know a couple of them were high. And I know I kind of said on the sidelines, like, wait a second, this is kind of the same thing that we've had with CJ that, people have kind of not been a really big fan of. But at the same time, he's got to get his nerves under him. And then once he did, and really, I thought that they could have just run Travion the whole game and still won this game by 30 if they really wanted to. Just that's the talent level difference that they have between Ohio State and Akron. But at the same time, like, it was nice to see him get everything underneath of him and be able to make those throws.
Let's talk about the offensive line. I thought they had a solid game. I thought Akron pretty much only brought pressure when it was clear that they were bringing, more pass rushers than the Buckeyes had blockers. They didn't seem to have too many, one-on-one battle wins, which I think in a lot of ways we expected, but you still have to go out there and actually execute it. Ohio State does have a couple of younger, or I should say maybe better inexperienced offensive linemen. Matthew Jones just hasn't seen a lot of snaps, but I thought he played well tonight. And obviously Paris Johnson is starting to come into his own a little bit. You've got DeJuan Jones, who continues to look really good at right tackle. Probably another good reason for Kyle McCord to walk away from this game feeling good about, the chemistry that he had with the guys up front.
Yeah, and I kind of talked about, just the talent level difference. And I think that games like these, it's very easy for Ohio State to say, we're just going to focus on ourselves. And if we do what we're supposed to do, then the game is going to go the way it's supposed to and the way we expect it to. So, for them to go out there and just execute plays, especially on defense where, they struggled with just being in the right place and just tackling and those kind of things, like, to really focus on those things individually and say, we're going to get better at these and we're just going to improve upon them ourselves versus, necessarily having to worry about what the opponent's going to do, because it really plays into your hands.
Kyle McCord finished the game 13 of 18 for a total of 319 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did throw an interception on that first drive of the third quarter. But I liked the way that Ryan Day, once McCord's heart rate came down a bit, I like the way that he gave McCord a chance to let it rip a little bit. The sequence that most stands out to me that might feel a little bit irrelevant in the grand scheme of things, but I thought was noticeable. It was the very end of that first half when Ohio State was using timeouts forcing Akron to punt from basically their own goal line with the intention of, hey, let's get the ball back and see if we can do something with it. I think Ohio State had 14 seconds or something like that when they got it back. And one play, Kyle just throws a bomb up the right-hand side of the field and finds, if I remember correctly, I think it was Garrett Wilson. And you know, that added 3 points. The next play, Ohio State kicks a field goal. Those are the kinds of things that, you know, maybe Ohio State hasn't done quite well enough the first 3 games of the year. But today, there was a fluidity and a rhythm to the offense. You know, it's got that big play capability, but I liked that aggressive mentality, even with a young quarterback.
Yeah, and you know, it really builds his confidence too. So if you're ever in a situation like that, like obviously we don't know, you know, who's going to be the starter next week, how CJ's shoulder, all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, if you're going to take him on the road and you're going to have him as your starter next week at Rutgers, like you're going to need that. You're going to need somebody who's willing to push the ball down the field and has that confidence in himself to be able to move the ball. And especially in situations where, I mean, 14 seconds is not a lot of time, but at the same time, like if you feel confident in your quarterback and you say, okay, we're going to go down and we're going to get points off of this, like that's a very important thing. And I know Kyle went into halftime very happy with that. And, you know, that's why they went to Jack Miller in the third quarter, because they were obviously happy with what Kyle was doing. And, you know, that, like I said, that's only going to build more confidence for him.
Do we have a quarterback controversy?
I mean, I don't know that Ryan Day will ever say that, but at the same time, like I think that there has to be some kind of consideration with, especially if you're going to say, okay, well, you know, I think that's honestly something he probably wanted to avoid, you know, and that's why he hasn't given into, you know, when I even asked him a couple weeks ago at a press conference, like, did you ever put, you know, consideration into putting another quarterback in when CJ is struggling? And, you know, he's going to say, no, I want him to go through those things. Like I want him to learn because he's our quarterback. But at the same time, like if he's not fully healthy, or if you feel like the offense is going to click better with Kyle, like, you know, and there was evidence today that it might actually click better with Kyle. So is Ryan Day going to come out and say that there is a quarterback controversy? I don't think so, but it's definitely something that we should consider.
I think I agree with a lot of that sentiment. The one thing I want to be too careful of here is just overreacting to watching Kyle tear up an Akron defense that has not been good this year.
Say it is Akron. They've only won 2 games in the last 3 years. So
they are a growing young program. Admittedly, I think DJ Irons is actually pretty darn good. I think their really offensive line has really struggled this year, and their defensive line gets no pressure with any sort of consistency. You know, I mean, Ohio State, here's a great number for you. Ohio State, through the first 3 games of the year against Minnesota, Oregon, and Tulsa, the defense, not just the defensive line, the defense for the Buckeyes in general, had 4 sacks and 11 tackles for loss total in 3 games. They had 9 sacks and 12 tackles for loss tonight. I mean, it was total domination throughout the game. And frankly, we saw some really good young offensive linemen. Tyleik Williams looked great. JTT got a start tonight. I thought Jack Sawyer played well. He got his first career sack. A very encouraging night defensively for the Buckeyes. And we'll talk more about that in a second. But I guess I just don't want to overreact to what we saw from Ohio State based on the opponent. And instead, I thought what Ryan Day said postgame makes a lot of sense. When you go back and look at the film with Kyle McCord, figure out, were they, for lack of a better way to say it, were they garbage yards? And he had some of those where maybe you throw a short pass and then a guy takes off. Or was it, no, it was a great read. It was good anticipation, good ball placement, whatever it might be, where you're expecting that high-level play from your quarterback and can project that moving forward.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And I think there was one specific play. It was a pass to Jackson Smith and Jigba where he threw it kind of, it wasn't necessarily behind him, but it was in a place that only he could catch the ball. And I think that those are kind of the things that he's going to be judged upon, and not necessarily, like you said, it's Akron. They won 59-7. So it's not as if, you know, you're going to sit there and say, oh, well, he's leading the offense to score after score after score, because, you know, would he have necessarily done that against Oregon, whose defense was tremendously better than Akron? I mean, that's obviously not the case, but at the same time, it's kind of what I mentioned earlier about the, you know, judging against themselves and playing within themselves. And when you're sitting there and you're saying, okay, let's take away the defense in this situation, did he put the ball in the right spot? is he leading his receivers how he's supposed to? Is he raising the, just the play of the team in general? And I think that that's something that once you do sit there and you watch the film versus watching a game live, that's where, you're going to see those differences.
Just a couple of other offensive numbers to share with you. The Buckeyes, 622 yards of total offense, but these two numbers jumped off the page at me. 10.2 yards per play, and they had 21.4 yards per completed pass. I mean, that is unbelievably good, and I have to think that that's got to be close to a school record if it isn't a school record. We'll take a little digging to figure that out, but we'll see if we can get that information to you at some point. Everybody knows the big play nature of this offense. I don't think anybody's really surprised by that at this point. But it was nice to see that maybe for the first time in 4 games, it didn't really matter who was out there, even in the latter stages of this game when Jack Miller was playing quarterback and Master T got a couple of rushing touchdowns. Donovan Jackson got in the game on the offensive line. Great to see that. We saw some of the young tight ends. We saw Mecca Egbuka make an unbelievable play, and he almost scored. Marvin Harrison got in the game. I mean, just there was a real feel for some of the young blood and the young talent on this team that I think, generates an excitable feeling. I mean, certainly promising and reason to think that this could be a really, really good offense going forward.
Yeah, and to that point, you kind of mentioned the defense too, and I think that was something that we saw a little bit different today, was just the youth in there between JTT, Tyleek Williams, Jack Sawyer. Like, it seems like and I mentioned this last week as well, they're so young that they're not overthinking things, and I think that that's something that the defense did a lot in the first 3 games of the season, was just kind of, maybe you get in your head a little too much, you're in the wrong spot, you start thinking, and then all of a sudden it just kind of snowballs from there. And I think there's a difference with these guys because they're just so young and they just want to make a play. Like, they don't care about, how to do it. It's just a matter of, I want to get to the quarterback. And you really see that with Tyleek. And I think that, Haskell kind of said it today too, but I mean, that kid is going to be good.
Oh man.
So, it's just a matter of, him obviously refining his technique. The more he works with Larry Johnson and all that, it's, like I said, he's going to be good.
All right. So defensively, the Buckeyes defensive starters were somewhat predictable, couple of changes. The defensive line tonight, at least at the outset, Zach Harrison and JT Tuimoloau were the starting defensive ends, with Haskell Garrett, who had a great night, and Antoine Jackson, who I thought also played really well on the interior of the line. Cody Simon and Taraja Mitchell were the starting linebackers. So Tommy Eichenberg, who had started each of the first 3 games of the year last week, did not have a tackle. Tommy did not start tonight, but he did get a decent bit of playing time. I thought Cody and Taraja both played really good football. Obviously, Cody Simon had a great interception. And then the defensive backs was a bit interesting. Seven Banks, I thought there were times tonight that Seven didn't look very good. And I'm interested to go back and watch the film on that because I think he's a lot better than what he showed early in the game. But he and Denzel Burke were the starting corners. Ronnie Hickman had another terrific game, including a pick 6, but even beyond just the interception. Cam Martinez, who had a pick 6 last week, got a start. And Bryson Shaw has continued to look a little bit better, promising there, especially after losing Josh Proctor a couple weeks ago. That was your starting 11 for the Silver Bullets. They didn't come out maybe quite the way you wanted to early on and left some of the 95,000 folks that were here groaning a little bit. But as the game progressed, the pressure ratcheted up, the coverage was tight. I thought they did a pretty good job of keeping DJ Irons from just, running rampant when clearly his skill set is, the ability to extend plays. All in all, I think a lot of reasons to be happy about the way the defense played.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to put too much emphasis on, one single game, but between last week and this week and last week, so it's 2 games. But, I've been really impressed with DJ Irons. I think that, he has a lot of the tools needed to succeed at the quarterback position. And, I think that, once they get into MAC play, like he could tear it up. So, there was moments tonight that, once he got running and, it looked like maybe he was a Big Ten type of quarterback, so but yeah, when you're talking about kind of settling into roles and finding out who is your starters along the defense, Ronnie Hickman continues to impress. I know a lot of people didn't even think that he was probably a starter coming into this year, but he has 2 interceptions, the interception today and then the touchdown. Like I was expecting him, at least from my point of view on the sidelines, like I thought he was just going to light the kid up. And then the next thing I know, he has the ball in his hands and he's going the other way. So
I think it surprised him.
Yeah.
Like just kind of landed in him.
It's just kind of one of those things, like the more they get, Cameron Martinez is another kid who I think that, is going to have an impact in that defense as well. So it's just a matter of, still continuing to find those pieces. And, obviously it helps that, the next 2 weeks, Rutgers did obviously play a lot better at Michigan today. And, I think that they're on the right track under Greg Schiano, but, you expect Ohio State to go in, they're probably going to be a massive favorite next week as well. So, just building upon those things, Rutgers doesn't necessarily have an offense that turns the ball over a lot. So maybe there's not those kind of things, but you just got to be, very fundamentally sound. And I think if Ohio State continues to do those things, they're only going to improve.
From my perspective, this was the kind of game the Buckeyes needed to have early in the year. I don't really care what the final score of the game was going to be. It was about execution. They threw up 600 yards of offense. They had a defensive score. They forced a couple turnovers. They really got after it on the defensive line. And I think I've been more annoyed by that than anything else these first 3 games. This defensive line just hasn't done what we're so used to seeing and maybe even took for granted a little bit. I'm not sure that there's a Chase Young or a Joey Bosa or a Nick Bosa on this unit right now today. But I think we've seen some instances where some of these guys are showing, an advanced skill set. Remember, Tyreek Smith didn't play today. Teron Vincent was out. Javonte Jean-Baptiste was out. I mean, this was definitely a younger defensive line, with the exception of Zach Harrison returning. But and obviously Haskell Garrett. But I really liked what I saw from them up front. And if nothing else, it's just a game for some confidence for those guys to feel like, okay, things aren't quite as bad as maybe, they were led to believe. I'm sure they didn't think they were bad over in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, but there were a lot of us in the media and a lot of fans saying, hey, gee, this isn't so good right now on the defensive line. Tonight should do a huge, huge boost for their confidence.
Yeah, and to your point about there not being, maybe a Joey or a Nick Bosa or a Chase Young, I think a lot of that has to do with, if you look back to 2018, Nick went out, he had the core injury, and Chase was kind of thrown into the fire as the number 1 defensive end. And, there was times where he struggled too. Like he wasn't a top 5 pick Chase Young. So it's kind of growing into those things. And I think that that's something that we're going to continue to see from JTT, Jack Sawyer, and honestly, like everybody kind of had those expectations for Zach Harrison, but I think that he would be the first to admit that when he came to Ohio State, he was still raw. And I think that that's something he's still continuing to grow as a player. And, he's not necessarily a first round pick next year in the draft, but at the same time, like if he continues to take steps forward, maybe, 2 years from now, we're talking about that. So it's just kind of one of those things. They're still pretty young, still relatively inexperienced at those positions. And, they're only going to get better as the season goes on.
Let's wrap up tonight with the big story that everybody's talking about. And unfortunately, we just don't have a ton more information to share with you because the Buckeyes are being, as you would expect, pretty tight-lipped on this. Ryan Day, I mean, it was the very first question he was asked post-game. What's going on with Kavon Pope? Is he still on the team? What happened down on the field? The best answer to all of that stuff that I can give you is that at some point in the second quarter, when Ohio State had a 28-7 lead, they looked like they were bringing a certain personnel package out onto the field, and the coaching staff either changed the play or changed the grouping, whatever, and decided not to bring out that package. Kavon Pope, who's, sounds like he's been a little disgruntled. He's a 4th-year senior, and he hasn't seen the field a whole lot. He was supposed to be coming on, and then that grouping got pulled back off, and Taraja Mitchell had waved him off. And, I mean, it must have just been the straw that broke the camel's back because he snapped, and he threw a temper tantrum that looked like a 5-year-old on the sideline. It was not pretty. Ryan Day and Al Washington both had a fairly heated, exchange with Kavon. And at one point, I mean, Ryan Day essentially kind of flung his finger as if to say, get out of here. I don't think Ryan did. I mean, I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but it didn't appear that Ryan was like, you're kicked off the team kind of thing. But Kavon took his gloves off and he chucked him into the stands, and he was pulling his jersey off, and he was acting in a way that was not particularly amicable. Javonte Jean-Baptiste tried to calm him down. Cameron Babb tried to calm him down. Al Washington tried to calm him down. He wasn't having it. And eventually CJ Barnett took him back to the locker room. I don't know if we've seen the last of Kavon Pope or not. I kind of have to think that, based on the couple of tweets he sent out, one of which he's deleted, have to think that he's not going to return. Ryan Day just wouldn't talk about it. Obviously, that's the big storyline that everybody is talking about coming out of this game, which had a final score of 52-point difference that, everybody expected. Nobody expected a second linebacker this week with Dallas Gant entering the transfer portal. I don't think anybody expected a linebacker to do what Kavon did today.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't really expect anybody to do that. I know there was a couple years ago, I believe a guy for either the Miami Dolphins or the Buffalo Bills, Vontae Davis maybe, did something very similar where he basically retired at halftime, and it was just like, wow, you put so much time and effort into things. And Kavon specifically, he's been here for 3.5 years, been waiting his time, regardless of what goes on behind the scenes, which we obviously don't know about. And I think that that's a very important part of it is like, from what I've been told, that he's been disgruntled for several years now about his lack of playing time. So it's not one of those things where this is just all of a sudden a thing. He and some family members voiced some unhappiness following Minnesota when he didn't play beyond special teams. So, it's kind of one of those things like when you get to Akron, maybe I understand it. At one point, you sat here and you say to yourself, I've been playing for 3 years. I've been waiting my turn. And Dallas was in a very similar situation. Obviously, he didn't go on the field and throw his jersey and, all that kind of stuff. He kind of took a different route, and he's no longer here. But, it's just an unfortunate situation to sit there and say, like, we don't know all the details. But, yeah, I mean, I wish Kavon the best. And, I hope that Ohio State is able to, and Ryan Day is able to have a conversation with him and say, air out whatever the issue is and move forward from it however they need to do that.
Yeah, I guess I just have a hard time envisioning, a way that he is still here. I don't know if that's going to become an official thing where the school would say that he is not playing anymore. He made it sound like on social media that he was, heading out. Again, I don't know Kavon particularly well, so I'm going to reserve judgment in that regard. He obviously did not act the way you should act, and if that's the way he goes out guns blazing, then that's.
I think the social media part of it is the part that kind of takes it over the top, if you will, because it's one thing to be in the heat of the moment and say, like, I'm frustrated by whatever the situation is. Maybe he thought he was going to get more playing time. Maybe he thought he was going to be a starter going into this year, because we know, all of us have talked about all offseason that they've had to replace 4 starters, and then they kind of switched to, they did play 4 linebackers for a good amount of games last year, and then to go back to 2 this year, and just kind of have a different defensive front, that has to be frustrating for him. But at the same time, there's a way to act on the field. There's a way to act in public and those kind of things. And I don't think that he did that. Maybe you can let that go. But then, you go on social media and you say what he said, like that's kind of a different story. And that's really hard to come back from.
I don't think there is coming back from it. That's just my guess. But
say the tunnel up the tunnel up to the locker room might have been the tunnel to the transfer portal, if we're being honest.
Yeah, that's for sure. So we'll keep an eye on that story throughout the course of the week. If there's news to share with you, we will certainly do that. But that was maybe just the one dark cloud that hovered over an otherwise really good night. CJ Stroud gets the night off because he's trying to nurse his sore shoulder, and you got a really good glimpse of what Kyle McCord is capable of, and you certainly saw a little bit of Jack Miller there toward the end of the game. I think it's also fair to point out that at some points Akron wasn't playing with their starters either, and so there are probably certain plays, certain stats that are going to get blown up a little bit because the talent gap on the field widened. But all in all, this was the kind of game Ohio State really desperately needed. And we've got plenty to talk about this week coming up because, Now it's back into the Big Ten, where even though Ohio State has stubbed its toe in week 2 against Oregon, they are undefeated in Big Ten play. They've got a Rutgers team right off the bat that gave them kind of an annoying game last year that never really felt like they were in danger of losing, but it was far from a comfortable win. And then the Buckeyes got to play a Maryland team that seems to have a pretty good offense, but, total team package might still be a work in progress. And then finally going to have a bye and can assess sort of going forward, with the Indianas and Penn States and Michigan States and Michigans of the world to kind of wrap up the season. But a good step forward in the right direction tonight for the Buckeyes. And I think Ohio State fans can take a deep breath because they probably saw something tonight that looked a whole lot more like what the Ohio State football team has put out the last couple of years. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it just, to me, when they put together a defensive effort like that, it's something to build upon. And, we've definitely torn them apart, at the seams with certain things. And I think that, if you can put together an effort like that against a team that, it's not a great team, but they definitely have a couple pieces offensively, particularly at quarterback and wide receiver, that can give you a couple problems. And, maybe on the first drive they did, and people were kind of groaning a little bit in the stands and all that. But, to then buckle down and really put together a great defensive effort after that is something to build upon. So, it's definitely a place to move forward.
59 unanswered points. Certainly good work from the Buckeyes in that regard. For Andrew Lind, I'm Brendan Gulick. Hope you'll join us again here real soon, either on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe to our content there. We've got plenty on social media as well, and all the latest you need on BuckeyesNow.com. We'll see you real soon. Ohio State, our instant analysis tonight from a Buckeye win, 59-7 over Akron.